15 years ago, my sister showed up at my doorstep, eyes wild, clutching two frightened children. She whispered one sentence, "They're yours now." Then she disappeared. I raised them, loved them, built a life around them. And just when I thought peace had settled in, she returned. With a lawsuit. Kidnapping, she claimed. Her own kids. Now the media's tearing me apart, and those same children are being dragged into a courtroom like they're stolen property. But there's something she doesn't know, something buried in the past that could unravel everything. This isn't just a fight for custody, it's a fight for truth. I used to believe my life was steady, predictable, safe. I was 38, married to a man who adored me, working as a nurse in a small Oregon town. My days followed a quiet rhythm, early mornings with coffee, long shifts at the hospital, evenings with my husband, dinners that smelled like rosemary and garlic. Children had never been part of the picture. We had talked about it briefly, but both agreed our lives were full enough without the chaos of parenthood. I thought I had everything I needed. That illusion shattered on a rainy Thursday night when my younger sister, Amanda, appeared at my doorstep. Her face was pale, her clothes damp, and her hands clutched two trembling children who looked no older than 4 and 6. Their eyes were wide, darting around like cornered animals. Amanda's hair was a tangled mess, and she smelled faintly of cigarettes and fear. Before I could even ask what was happening, she blurted out, "I can't explain. Just take them. They're yours now. Please, Olivia, please." I froze, staring at her in disbelief. My sister had always been reckless, prone to bad decisions, but this was beyond anything I could imagine. "Amanda, what are you talking about? Where are you going? Who are these kids running from?" Her lips trembled as she leaned close, eyes wet with desperation. "I'm being followed. There are people who want to hurt me. Hurt them. If I stay, they'll find us. If something happens to me, you have to promise me you'll protect them." I should have pressed for answers, demanded an explanation, but something in her voice, a mix of terror and resignation, disarmed me. Against every rational instinct, I nodded. "I'll keep them safe, like always, Mandy. I'll protect them." Her shoulders sagged with relief. She bent down to kiss each child on the forehead, tears streaking her cheeks, then pulled me into a tight embrace. Her whisper burned into my ear. "If anything happens to me, you have to swear you'll never let them go." And just like that, she was gone. The days that followed blurred together. At first, I expected her to come back in hours, maybe days. I told my husband it was temporary, that Amanda had hit another rough patch. We took the children in, set up a makeshift bedroom with spare blankets and stuffed animals borrowed from neighbors. I told myself I was just babysitting. That's what sisters do. But as 3 days stretched into 3 weeks, Amanda's absence began to rot inside me. I called her cell phone. Sometimes it rang, sometimes it went straight to voicemail. The few times she picked up, her voice was rushed, panicked, filled with static. She always ended the call the same way. "I'll explain soon, just keep them safe." Then silence. 3 months passed, no visits, no real explanation. Just a single letter slipped into my mailbox one morning, the handwriting jagged and frantic. "Olivia, don't tell anyone. Keep the children hidden. If people find out, we're all in danger. Trust no one." I sat at the kitchen table holding that letter, my coffee growing cold, my hands shaking. I should have taken the kids to the authorities. That's what the rational world demanded. But how could I? I had promised my sister. And looking into the children's eyes, so vulnerable, so desperate for stability, I couldn't imagine abandoning them to strangers. But doubt gnawed at me. My husband grew restless, frustrated. "Liv, this isn't our responsibility. What if you're complicit in something illegal? What if she's running from the law?" I didn't answer him because part of me feared he was right. Still, every time I tucked the children into bed, every time I brushed the girl's hair or bandaged the boy's scraped knee, something inside me hardened. They needed me. And maybe I needed them too. Yet the shadows kept lengthening. One afternoon, while unpacking the girl's school bag to wash her clothes, I noticed a hidden zipper pocket. Inside was a small, battered phone. My breath caught. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Amanda's either. The screen was cracked, the battery nearly dead, but one unsent message glowed on the screen, typed out and never delivered. Mom said she will die if we don't stay quiet. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. The room spun. Questions flooded my mind. What danger had Amanda entangled us in? Who exactly was after her? And why had she dragged me and these innocent children into her nightmare? I wanted to believe I could still return to my life of normalcy, but staring at that message, I knew the truth. There was no going back. Rumors move faster than truth, especially in a small town. At first, neighbors smiled politely when I walked the children to school, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Whispers began to follow me in the grocery store, at the gas station, in church. She stole those kids. Her sister dumped them, you know. What kind of woman hides children like that? It wasn't long before the police knocked on my door. They stood stiffly on the porch, hands resting on their belts. "Mrs. Harris, we've had reports." The officer's voice trailed off, almost embarrassed. I invited them in, offered coffee, showed them the kids' bedrooms, their drawings taped to the fridge, the stacks of school permission slips signed in my neat handwriting. Without a complainant, the officers had no grounds. "Until someone comes forward, our hands are tied," one finally said, his eyes heavy with suspicion. "But if you hear from your sister, you need to let us know." I nodded, but the moment they left, I felt like a criminal in my own home. My husband grew colder with each passing week. "Olivia, this is madness. You've lied to the police. You've lied to me. Do you even know if Amanda's alive?" I wanted to scream that I didn't know, that I was drowning in the same questions, but instead I kept silent, too afraid to admit the truth out loud. One night, he packed a suitcase. "I didn't marry into this," he muttered, slamming the door. His absence left a hollow echo in the house, one the children tried to fill with laughter and drawings, but it was never the same. I lost my job soon after. A hospital can't keep an employee under constant gossip about criminal activity. They called it downsizing. I knew better. Suddenly, I was a single woman with no income, 2 mouths to feed, and a sister who might as well have been a ghost. That was when the knock came. A woman in her 40s stood at my door, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, her fingers clutching a tattered purse. She didn't introduce herself, just stared at the children playing behind me and whispered, "She did it to me too." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" "Your sister, Amanda. She left kids with me once, said she'd be back. She never came. I couldn't keep them." Her voice cracked, and she shook her head violently. "They took them away. I still see their faces." Before I could question her further, she turned and walked off into the dusk, leaving me trembling. Amanda's betrayal was larger than I'd imagined. It wasn't just me. How many families had she used like pawns in whatever twisted game she was playing? That night, unable to sleep, I dug through Amanda's old belongings. At the bottom of a dusty suitcase, I found folded papers, 2 birth certificates. My heart stuttered as I read the names of the parents. Not Amanda, not anyone I recognized. The children I had loved for years, might not even be hers. I pressed the papers to my chest, nausea rising, questions gnawing at me. Who were they? Why had she lied? And what danger had she hidden us from? The next blow came weeks later. The girl, now older, almost a teenager, woke screaming from a nightmare. She sobbed, describing a man with a phoenix tattoo on his arm who watched her from the shadows of her dream. Moments later, she collapsed unconscious. I rushed her to the emergency room, hands shaking, heart thundering. Doctors said it was stress, but I couldn't ignore the chill crawling up my spine. The town turned against me completely. Mothers pulled their children away when we passed. Invitations to community events dried up. At church, I felt stares burning into my back. The whispers grew sharper. "She's lying. Those aren't hers. God knows where she got them." The children heard it too. They shrank from the world, hiding behind me, clutching my hands so tight my fingers went numb. I tried to reassure them, but I couldn't reassure myself. And then, after 6 long years of silence, the phone rang. The number was blocked. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me. Her voice slithered through the line, familiar and venomous. "Olivia, did you miss me?" I couldn't breathe. "Amanda, where have you been? What have you done?" She laughed, a sound colder than the wind rattling my windows. "I'll take back what's mine," she said. Then the line went dead. I stared at the silent receiver, my heart pounding in my ears. The words seared into me like a curse. The summons arrived in a crisp white envelope, its seal heavy and official. I tore it open at the kitchen table, my hands trembling. Amanda Harris v. Olivia Harris. Charges: kidnapping, unlawful custody, psychological manipulation of minors. For a moment, the words blurred before my eyes. Then rage flooded in, hot and sharp. Amanda had left them with me. She had begged me to protect them, and now she dared to call me a kidnapper? The courtroom was packed the first day of hearings. Reporters filled every bench, cameras flashing as Amanda swept in like royalty. She was unrecognizable from the desperate woman who had once dumped 2 terrified children on my porch. Her hair gleamed, her clothes tailored, a diamond on her finger that could pay off my mortgage twice over. At her side stood a man in an immaculate suit, a high-powered attorney I'd only ever seen on television. The tabloids called her a survivor, a poor mother who had clawed her way back from trauma only to find her children stolen. Headlines screamed, "Sister or thief," the custody trial of the decade. The children were called to the stand. My heart ached watching them shuffle forward, hands clasped, eyes darting nervously toward Amanda. They had grown under my care, but in that moment they looked like orphans, stranded between 2 worlds. The judge's questions were simple, but the weight behind them was unbearable. Did they recognize their mother? Did they want to live with her? Their voices shook. The boy muttered that he didn't remember. The girl whispered that Amanda scared her. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Amanda's face hardened, but her lawyer spun it into a narrative. Olivia had brainwashed them, poisoned their young minds, alienated them from their real mother. And then came the twist that shattered me completely. Amanda was married to a billionaire real estate magnate, a man who strode into court with the arrogance of untouchable power. He slipped an arm around her as though she were a prize he had claimed. Then the revelation. He was the biological father of one of the children. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled, cameras flashed, whispers tore through the air like wildfire. My knees buckled under the weight of it. If he was the father, then Amanda had a legitimate claim, stronger than any bond of care or love I had built over 15 years. That night, I sat alone in the dark house, staring at the walls that once felt like home. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. "You don't understand," the message read. Amanda didn't climb her way up by chance. She sold something to get where she is, something you don't want to uncover. I stared at those words until they burned into me. What had she sold? Who had she betrayed? And was this fight bigger than I had ever imagined? The media frenzy only grew. I was no longer Olivia, the nurse who had cared for abandoned children. I was the fake mother, the imposter, the thief. Strangers spat at me on the street. I received death threats in my mailbox. The pressure mounted until even breathing felt like a crime. Then the court's ruling came. Temporary custody suspended. The children were to be placed in separate foster homes until the case resolved. I screamed, begged, pleaded, but the bailiff pulled me back as the children sobbed, clinging to my arms. Their cries echoed in my skull long after they were dragged away. Alone in my empty house, silence pressed down like a coffin. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. Nights stretched into dawn as I scribbled in a journal that read more like a will than a diary. I cataloged what little I owned, instructions for the children if I never saw them again. I hovered on the edge of despair, wondering if my fight had destroyed the very family I had sacrificed everything for. If love wasn't enough in the eyes of the law, then what was the point of holding on? And yet, I couldn't let go. If you were me, I whispered into the empty room, would you surrender them? Would you let her win? One evening, as I sifted through stacks of legal documents, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, yellowed at the edges. Amanda, years younger, stood outside a grim orphanage. In her arms was a small child, not one of the two I had raised. Behind her, the sign read, State Home for Children, 2005. On the back of the photo, scrawled in black ink, were 4 chilling words. Ask her about him. My breath caught. This wasn't just a custody battle. It was a war built on secrets buried so deep they could destroy us all. After the photograph arrived, I stopped waiting for the truth to find me. I went after it. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled man named Howard who had spent 3 decades digging into secrets no one wanted unearthed. Within weeks, he returned with a file thick enough to crush me. Amanda's life, exposed in black and white, was darker than I had ever feared. She had debts that stretched across states, false identities used like disposable masks, and, worst of all, records of children she had abandoned, sold to pay off loans or curry favor with men in power. My stomach twisted as I flipped through birth certificates doctored with her name, notarized papers riddled with inconsistencies. The children I had raised weren't hers at all. They were merchandise from a deal that had collapsed, left in my arms because I was the one person foolish enough to keep them without asking questions. I wept until my chest ached. 15 years of love, sleepless nights, scraped knees, and birthday candles, all built on a lie. Yet when I looked at those children, I knew none of it mattered. Blood or no blood, they were mine in every way that counted. Howard leaned forward, voice low. You want to win this? Expose her. Show the court who she really is. The world was against me, but the internet proved a strange ally. Somehow the children's journals, filled with drawings, fears, and stories of their life with me, leaked online. Strangers read about bedtime songs and pancakes on Saturdays, about Amanda's absence and the nightmares she left behind. Suddenly, hashtags trended. Hey, let them stay. People I'd never met rallied to my side. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. But Amanda had her own defense. She had checked herself into a psychiatric facility, her lawyers arguing she was too fragile to face cross-examination. Howard scoffed when he told me, she's not sick, she's hiding. It's a shield against prosecution. Courts hesitate to punish the mentally ill. She knows exactly what she's doing. The walls of deceit were closing in, but then came the blow that made my knees buckle. A manila envelope slid under my door one night. Inside, Amanda's psychiatric records stamped confidential. At the bottom, in neat type, was a detail that stole the breath from my lungs. The original legal guardian of the 2 children, the name signed in black ink, was my father. I clutched the pages, shaking, memories flooding back of a distant man who had always carried secrets like shadows. He had died years ago, never explaining the rifts in our family. Now I understood. He had been involved all along, and Amanda had twisted his actions into her own weapon. What kind of legacy had he left us? And what would it mean if the truth came out? I had no choice but to turn grief into strategy. I rebuilt every step of my life with the children, creating a timeline so meticulous no lie could unravel it. School reports, medical visits, photographs, testimonies. I gathered them all. Piece by piece, I constructed a fortress of evidence. The children, now old enough to understand, took matters into their own hands. They wrote letters to the judge, words raw and devastating. If Olivia goes to jail, we will end our lives. She is our only mother. I begged them not to write such things, but they insisted. They have to know we mean it. I tracked down a retired social worker who remembered Amanda's earlier schemes. She had seen the forged papers, heard the threats. With trembling hands, she agreed to testify. I stayed silent too long, she whispered. It's time someone told the truth. But the truth was poison and salvation all at once. If I revealed everything, I would destroy Amanda's carefully constructed empire. I would also stain my father's name forever. Silence might protect the family legacy. Exposure could free the children and damn us all. If you were me, I asked the empty room one night, would you guard the secret or let it burn us alive? The question hung heavy, unanswered until the next hearing. The judge, stone-faced and weary of delays, leaned forward. His gavel struck wood, echoing like a gunshot. This case is no longer private, he declared. Given the severity of the allegations, the nation deserves transparency. We will hold a public trial, broadcast live. Gasps filled the courtroom. Amanda's lawyer paled. My chest tightened, torn between dread and exhilaration. There would be no more shadows. Every lie, every betrayal, every hidden truth would bleed under the light of cameras, and there would be no turning back. The courthouse was suffocating with heat and eyes, every bench filled, every corner buzzing with cameras, every breath I took replayed in microphones. The trial had become a national spectacle, a theater of blood where my family's ruin was entertainment for millions. I sat stiffly, my lawyer whispering strategy, but I couldn't hear him. For 3 hours I remained silent, my heart pounding so loudly I thought the world could hear it. Amanda spoke in rehearsed tones, painting herself as a victim, her voice quivering on cue, her tears sliding perfectly down her powdered cheeks. The billionaire husband squeezed her hand, nodding like he was watching a play he'd already bought the ending to. The judge pressed the children for testimony. The boy faltered, too frightened to speak. The room seemed to close in until the girl, the one who had spent her entire life calling me Mom, stood up, her small voice cutting through the static. She was never our mother, she said, pointing directly at Amanda. Olivia is everything. She's the one who stayed, the one who loved us. That woman abandoned us. Gasps thundered across the courtroom. For a moment, I thought the ceiling might collapse under the weight of truth. Amanda's face twisted, the mask tearing apart. You don't understand, she screamed, rising from her chair, her composure gone. We're both his children, both of us. I'm only taking back what's mine. The world froze. I stared at her, words tumbling in my brain. Both of us? The room erupted again as Amanda spat venom. That man, your precious father, he gave guardianship to you. You think you were chosen because you're better? No, you were just convenient. His puppet. We're both his blood half-sisters, and I will not be erased. The revelation slammed into me like a tidal wave. The papers, the names, the shadows of my father's secrets, it all made a horrible sense. He had bound us together with lies and silence. I wasn't just fighting Amanda. I was fighting a legacy of deceit that had poisoned us both. Chaos tore through the room. The judge pounded the gavel, reporters shouted, flashes blinded me, and then, in the confusion, Amanda bolted. She shoved past bailiffs, heels clattering down the marble halls, her lawyer screaming her name. For a heartbeat, I thought she might vanish again, slip through cracks as she always had. But she was dragged back in handcuffs within the hour, her purse spilling across the floor. Inside, multiple IDs, passports in different names, proof of the life she'd led. The trial resumed under a storm of scandal. Her lawyer's arguments crumbled, witnesses came forward, evidence stacked higher. The public that once crucified me now turned its fury on her. When the verdict came, it was swift. Custody granted to me. Amanda guilty of fraud, endangerment, and perjury. But instead of prison, the court ordered psychiatric rehabilitation, 5 years in a secure facility. Reporters swarmed me as I left the courthouse, asking about damages, about the fortune I could claim in lawsuits. I said nothing. Money was never the point. Love was, family was, and I had already won. Weeks later, the children stood before a judge once more, not as pawns, but as people. Their names were officially changed. They carried my surname now, etched into documents, stitched into the future. For the first time in years, I felt like the ground beneath me was steady, yet shadows lingered. At night, I still replayed Amanda's face, The fury, the desperation. Her words gnawed at me. We were both his children. She wasn't wrong. Would you forgive her? I whispered to myself in the quiet, asking a question I didn't know how to answer. Could I hate her and still recognize the broken girl underneath? Could I condemn her while admitting we were two sides of the same wound? Then came the letter. It arrived in plain white, postmarked from the institution. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity, or maybe guilt, pried it open. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, familiar. I wish I had been your sister once, just once in the way that mattered. Not this, not all of this. Maybe one day you'll remember me as something other than your enemy, Amanda. I folded the letter and set it on the table, staring at it until dawn. Even in victory, the scars of family never fully heal. 5 years after the trial, the dust had settled into something like peace. I no longer lived under the shadow of Amanda's accusations, nor under the suffocating weight of secrecy. Instead, I turned my scars into something that could matter. With the settlement money I refused to keep for myself and with donations that poured in after my story became public, I founded a small but determined nonprofit, the Mothers Without Names Center. It started in a modest brick building on the edge of town with peeling paint and creaking floors, but inside, we built warmth where coldness had ruled. Women who had found themselves raising children that weren't biologically theirs, nieces, nephews, abandoned little ones, came through the doors. Some were broken, others furious, most just tired. We gave them food, counseling, a place to rest, legal advice, and more importantly, we gave them something they'd been denied for too long: dignity. Each morning I walked into that building, I remembered the first night Amanda left those children on my doorstep. I remembered the way my hands had trembled, the way fear and love had battled in my chest. Now I saw that same battle in other women's eyes, and I knew, without words, how to tell them, "You are not alone." The children I had raised grew into adults who carried that same fire. The boy, once shy and broken, studied law. He swore he would fight for families like ours, families left voiceless by loopholes and corruption. The girl, my daughter in every way, became a psychologist. She worked with children scarred by abandonment, giving them words for the wounds they had carried in silence. Watching them graduate, step into their lives, I felt a pride that was not bound by biology, but by years of scraped knees, whispered promises, and the endless rhythm of love given without condition. When I wasn't working at the center, I wrote. Late nights at my desk, with coffee gone cold, I poured my life into pages. The book was titled Love Doesn't Need a Birth Certificate. It wasn't just my story. It was the story of anyone who had ever loved a child that the world told them wasn't theirs. When it was published, letters came from across the country. Women, men, even children who said, "This is me. This is us." For the first time, I felt like my pain had meaning beyond survival. Then, one day, while I was cleaning up the center after hours, a young woman slipped inside. She was thin, her clothes worn, her face streaked with tears. Without a word, she threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. "I was one of them," she whispered. "Years ago, I was one of the children who stayed here. You don't remember me, but I remember you. You saved me. You gave me a home, even if it was just for a little while. I never forgot." Tears blurred my vision. I held her tightly, realizing that the seeds we plant in despair sometimes bloom years later in ways we never expect. Her words haunted me into the night. I never forgot. Yet the past has a way of circling back, even when we think we've outrun it. It was a stormy evening when Amanda returned. Rain battered the windows of the center, thunder shaking the walls. I was locking up when I saw her standing there, soaked, smaller somehow than I remembered. 5 years in a psychiatric facility had drained the fire from her eyes, but left something raw, unguarded. She didn't speak at first. Neither did I. The years of anger, betrayal, and pain stretched between us like a chasm. And then, slowly, she stepped forward, her arms lifted, hesitant, trembling. I let her embrace me. There were no apologies, no explanations, just a long, broken hug in the middle of a storm, two sisters bound by blood and destroyed by it, yet clinging to each other like wreckage in a sea too wide to cross. When she pulled away, she left without a word. I didn't follow. Maybe there was nothing left to say. Later that night, I stepped onto the balcony of my home. The rain had cleared, leaving the air crisp, the sky littered with stars. The children, grown now, but forever mine, stood on either side of me. We looked out at the night together, the silence comfortable, whole. For once, I felt no weight pressing on my chest, no fear, no shame, no dread of what the world might take from me next. Only the steady warmth of love that had survived everything meant to destroy it. And as I watched the stars scatter their light across the dark, the final truth settled inside me, simple and absolute. Sometimes blood does not bind us tighter than love. It is not obligation that makes a family, but choice. Sometimes blood doesn't bind us as tightly as love. It is choice that makes a family.